In a Montana campground, a little girl is taken as she sleeps. Recalling a similar crime, investigators fear a killer is back. Desperate to find the girl alive, they face grim clues, false leads, and a cunning suspect. Police, agents, and a mother with unshakable determination struggle to solve the mystery of what happened in those dark woods.
While camping with her family in Montana, a 7-year-old girl was abducted from her tent. No one in the campground witnessed the crime, and the kidnapper left no clues. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. At the time, little was known of criminal profiling. Agents would use it as they raced against the clock to find a criminal more monstrous than anyone imagined.
Southwestern Montana, a land of epic mountain ranges and vast prairies. In June 1973, the Yeager family came to Montana from Michigan. Marietta Yeager was excited about her family exploring the West. Bill Yeager, a longtime auto worker, had taken a month off for this once-in-a-lifetime trip. It was 7-year-old Susie's first family vacation. Marietta's parents had also joined them for the trip. On Sunday, June 24th, they prepared to spend their last night in Montana's Headwaters State Park. In the morning, they would continue west. The eldest boy slept in the van, while the 4 young ones had their own tent.
All right, tuck yourselves in quick, guys.
Like every night, Susie wouldn't go to sleep without a goodnight hug and kiss.
Sleep fast. Night, night.
The night was chilly. Still, the Yeager children slept peacefully. The adults slept in a camper truck a few feet away. But not everyone in the campground was asleep. Around 4 a.m., a breeze awoke 13-year-old Heidi Yeager. She noticed a hole in the tent. Then she noticed Susie wasn't there. Confused and scared, she rushed to tell her parents. Marietta Yeager tried to understand what her daughter was saying.
I just thought that she must be just somewhere around. She's around, she had to go to the bathroom, but at the same time, there's this terror rising in you that, oh, please God, don't let this be true. Don't let this be true. I mean, I can remember wanting to wake up and find out that this is not real. This is not really happening.
Then, They saw the hole sliced in the tent.
That's when it's like it or not, Marietta, this is reality, and more than she's gone, but someone has taken her.
Their hearts sank further when they spotted Susie's stuffed animals in the grass.
She was sleeping with them. She always slept with them. And she must have dropped them because she couldn't hold on to them. It made it clear to me that she was taken away by force.
Right away, Bill Yeager drove to a phone to call police.
Okay, Mr. Yeager, slow down. I need you to tell me what's going on. I want you to hold on the line. I'm going to get help.
The sheriff's dispatcher immediately radioed Gallatin County Deputy Don Houghton, who was working the night shift.
State Park Campground have report of a 7-year-old.
10-4, I'm away.
On the way to the headwaters, Deputy Houghton stopped to pick up City County investigator John Onstad. Violent crime was rare in the area, so at first, investigator Onstad thought it a false alarm.
We're thinking that it really must be something else, that something like this would not be a kidnapping and it would resolve itself somehow.
When the investigators arrived, the Yeager family was distraught. As the Yeagers explained what they could, they brought the investigators to the back of the campsite. That changed everything for Deputy Houghton.
Right into the tent.
And that's when we saw the tent, and that the tent had been slit, and that kind of picked things up a little bit. It was a little eerie.
Footprints from the family were scattered around the tent in the damp grass. But investigator Onstad could see one set with a clear direction.
I could see the tracks in the dew coming to and from the area where the tent was, going back to a parking area, and the parking area had no vehicles in it.
The Gallatin County Sheriff's Office contacted the FBI.
1022, Haugen here.
Special Agent Pete Dunbar took the call at the Bozeman Field Office.
Special Agent Dunbar.
The FBI often joins kidnapping investigations because of the possibility of interstate travel.
Got a call on the
In any abduction, time is critical, as the chance of finding a victim alive diminishes with each passing hour.
What is it? I'll tell you on the way.
Dunbar and Special Agent William Terry left for the campground immediately. By the time the agents arrived, local deputies had started a search for Susie and had begun interviewing the other campers. The only clues so far were the footprints and the gash in the tent. But that was enough to convince Special Agent Dunbar what happened.
No question there was a kidnapping. In some cases you don't know, some types it's a parental type of thing, but in this instance, absolutely no question but there was a kidnapping of a child.
The search quickly became one of the largest in Montana history.
We had helicopters, we used the National Guard flying, we had boats, we had all-terrain vehicles, we had riders out identifying areas of abandoned buildings, old mine sites, anywhere where a person might be located.
They began at the Yeager campsite, then expanded in widening circles. During the search, a few veteran deputies recalled a similar investigation in the same campground 5 years earlier. That crime was discovered May 5th, 1968, when during a troop outing, a Boy Scout tried to wake up his tent mate. The 12-year-old had been stabbed and beaten during the night. The scout's lung had been punctured, and he suffered severe head trauma. He died the following day. That case remained unsolved. Many of those searching for Susie couldn't help but wonder if that killer was back. While the search of the woods continued, some deputies began tracking possible suspects. Reviewing criminal records, they began with sex offenders living nearby. Those without alibis were asked to come in for lie detector tests, according to Special Agent Dunbar.
In the immediate area, there were 3 or 4 absolute prime suspects because of past activities dealing with children. One in particular that was looked at very carefully.
The polygraph examiner asked the suspect about the night Susie vanished. Though their use is controversial, polygraphs monitor changes in heart rate, respiration, and perspiration that most people exhibit when they tell a lie. The suspect said he could not remember what he was doing that night. The polygraph results were inconclusive. Hoping for more information, agents sent the suspect to a nearby psychiatric hospital to be interrogated under sodium amytal, often referred to as truth serum. A barbiturate, sodium amytal produces a relaxed state in which suspects become less defensive and therefore more talkative. Under its influence, most people are unable to lie. Once the drug took effect and the suspect relaxed, his memory returned.
Anyone by that name? You never met anyone by that name?
He remembered what he had been doing during the time of the kidnapping. He had been in Butte, Montana. We checked it out. People in Butte could verify what he said was correct, and he was eliminated.
Hopes of a quick arrest were dashed. Police and the FBI sought the public's help. Hundreds of alarmed citizens throughout Montana called in tips. Deputies followed up on each one. One caller urged authorities to interview his 25-year-old neighbor in Manhattan, Montana, describing him as odd. The deputies knew the man, a local contractor. Nothing appeared suspicious, however. And like others in the community, he said he would do what he could to help. Then, a week after Susie disappeared, a man telephoned the home of a Gallatin County, Montana deputy.
Who is this?
The deputy's wife answered.
Just a minute, let me call her.
The caller claimed to be Susie's kidnapper and demanded a $50,000 ransom be delivered to a bus station in Denver. To confirm he had Susie, he described a minor deformity: rounded, hump-like nails on the young girl's index fingers.
Okay.
The woman called her husband, who contacted the FBI at the command center set up at the campground. Special Agent Dunbar told the Jaegers about the ransom call. When he mentioned the fingernails, they were stunned. Susie did have rounded nails on her index fingers. The call was legitimate. Agents needed the kidnapper to call back with details about the ransom drop. But the call never came. A crushing blow for the family and investigators, according to FBI Special Agent William Terry.
As time went by and there was nothing to give directions as to where the money should be placed or how she was going to be returned, the hope left.
Watching deputies drag the rivers in Headwaters Park for a body was agonizing for the Jaegers. Yet Marietta and Bill refused to give up hope.
I made a commitment to stay faithful to her as her mother, that not to give up, to continue to believe that she was still alive until such time, if ever it would have to happen, that I would have to accept concrete proof to the contrary.
Still, the Yeagers could not remain in the campground forever. Bill needed to return to work, so after more than a month, the family had to go home.
And it was so hard to leave, you know, for me, to leave the last place that I had seen her.
Despite the best efforts of law enforcement, they had not been able to find the kidnapper. But soon, he would find Marietta. In June 1973, 7-year-old Susie Yeager was abducted from her tent in Headwaters State Park, Montana. Although the family had to return to Michigan, the FBI assured Susie's parents, Bill and Marietta Yeager, that they would not give up on the case.
As soon as we got to Detroit, the FBI agents were waiting for us. And so I felt I could trust them. I felt that they were competent and they were willing to keep me informed. And for me, that was very important. I needed to know everything that was going on.
Though investigators thought Susie had likely been murdered, the Yeagers still hoped she was alive and that the kidnapper would make contact again. The FBI arranged for the phone company to trace any calls from the kidnapper and asked the Yeagers to place a recording device on their telephone.
I think the kids and I should be able to handle that. Doesn't seem too technical.
The family and their friends worked diligently to make certain nobody forgot about Susie. They established the Susie Yeager Reward Fund and printed 10,000 posters, which they mailed to every sheriff's office in Montana and the surrounding states, asking for them to be posted locally. Months passed. Still, the family continued to hope the kidnapper would call.
And it just sort of became my task to be there on the phone. And only one time did I leave in the beginning, and that was to pick up a son, one of my kids, at a class from which he was supposed to have gotten a ride home, but that didn't show. And so I was out of the house 10 minutes, and the kidnapper called.
Following established routine, the eldest son, Dan, who remained in the house, snapped on the tape recorder.
Who is this?
Would you like to know where Susie is?
Dan asked the kidnapper to release his sister. The caller complained that the police and FBI were involved.
Yeah? You may think
He said he couldn't release Susie without getting caught.
Wait, no, don't hang up. Oh, hey, no.
Seconds later, Marietta came home.
Mom's call.
Danny had just hung up the phone, and I could just tell by the look on his face, it was just stricken. He didn't even have to tell me. I knew he had just spoken to the kidnapper. And we had that call on tape, but no way of knowing who it was.
Authorities traced the call to a diner in Wyoming. Local officers checked the place, but the caller was gone, and employees did not recall anyone who had been on the payphone. FBI Special Agent William Terry.
There was a consensus of opinion at that time that Susie was dead.
Yeah.
And for some reason, this individual was attempting to torment the Yeager family.
Months passed with no new leads or calls. 8 months after Susie's kidnapping, the Gallatin County Sheriff's Office received a report that a 19-year-old woman had disappeared from Manhattan, Montana, 10 miles from the campground where Susie vanished. Her mother was worried and told the deputies what she knew.
I had fun. You drive safe, right?
She said that her daughter, Sandra Smolligan, was last seen on February 9th, returning to her apartment around midnight after a night out with friends. Her mother said Sandra's car was gone, and no one had heard from her in days. Like almost everyone in the small town, the deputies knew Sandra. They opened a missing persons case and set out in search of her car. Gallatin County Deputy Don Houghton, still working the Susie Yeager kidnapping, was also part of the new investigation.
The area that I was assigned was to the northwest of the town of Manhattan. And this was a large area. And what we were doing was driving county roads, dirt roads, farm roads, looking for the car.
On an abandoned ranch in the Horseshoe Hills, Deputy Houghton noticed fresh tire tracks off a dirt road, then spotted something that seemed out of place.
Got out to see what it was, and it happened to be a pair of women's panties.
Houghton wanted to check out the barn nearby. The door was nailed shut. Inside, a tarp and other debris covered a car. The license plate had been removed. But in the small community, most people knew their neighbors' vehicles. Deputy Houghton recognized the car. It was Sandra Smolligan's. There was no trace of the young woman.
Needed 1013 on a white Ford.
Houghton called in the find.
WP 521.
Deputies, sheriff's posse members, and volunteers scoured 5 square miles surrounding the barn.
All right, go.
In line searches, they marked any items that might be evidence.
Go.
2 days into the search, one group investigated a 55-gallon drum they found in a field.
There's something right here. Got a couple pictures.
Something had been burned inside.
Step back, please. Step back.
Among charred wood were bone fragments.
And the more we looked, we found bones spread out probably over a 75-yard area, most in very small pieces. They'd been broken up, chopped up, they were burned.
In the end, they collected more than 1,200 bone fragments. A forensic pathologist determined they were human, and some were probably from an adult white female. Dental records confirmed several teeth and jawbone fragments belonged to Sandra Smolligan. Investigator John Onstad feared that Sandra's killer might have also kidnapped Susie Yeager.
There was beginning to be a connection. Probably partly due to the part of the country we live in and what goes on here, what doesn't go on here.
Sandra Smolligan had been dismembered. Whoever committed such an unspeakable crime might have taken Susie too.
Hey, deputy.
8 months after Susie Yeager vanished from a Montana campground, deputies discovered the remains of Sandra Smolligan at a nearby Horseshoe Hills ranch. Authorities feared a connection.
There you go.
The investigators working the 2 cases frequently ate lunch together. One resident often joined them, always asking about the cases. David Masterson was an ex-Marine and a well-known local contractor. Some townspeople considered him strange. In the first week of the investigation, Masterson had been questioned about Susie's disappearance. Deputy Don Houghton knew that people who are overly curious about a crime are often involved.
On numerous occasions, David would come in and sit with us and eat. Always inquisitive. We were always cautious of what we said around him. But he was always volunteering for a search. Just kept in front of us, I guess. It bugged us.
FBI Special Agent Pete Dunbar realized Masterson was familiar with the area where Sandra's body was found.
David surfaced as a suspect again because we knew enough about David from before to know that he knew the Horseshoe Hills very well. And also, it developed that he had dated this girl, Sandra Smulligan.
Investigators asked Masterson to take a polygraph examination. He agreed.
I had a great deal of faith in a polygraph. I had had it utilized on other cases before, and invariably was a tremendous tool and never had one where it backfired.
During the examination, Masterson denied knowing anything about Susie Yeager's kidnapping or Sandra Smulligan's murder. He confirmed he dated Sandra only once because she didn't want to go out with him again. The polygraph examiner detected no sign of deception. As they had with other suspects in the Susie Yeager case, agents asked him to submit to questioning under sodium amytal.
You know Susie Yeager? Do? I mean, I've heard about her.
At the psychiatric hospital, under the barbiturate's influence, Masterson calmly answered every question.
He said everything then that he told me in my interview before we did sodium amytal. He didn't deviate one iota. As far as my interview is concerned, there was no difference whether he had it or did not have it. Put the investigation back to where we had nothing. We just ran out of everything. Couldn't have been more discouraged. We didn't know where to go. We had run out of suspects.
In the spring of 1974, the stalled case gathered new momentum after Dunbar met Special Agent Patrick Mullaney, who worked in the emerging field of criminal profiling. Believing he could help, Mullaney asked for the files in the Yeager case.
Give us all the interviews you've conducted. Give us all of the results of the investigations you've conducted. And we sat down for days going over all of those interviews, especially what kind of investigation that they were conducting. And we came back with an idea.
To the profilers, the nature of the crime, including surveillance and a stealthy abduction, suggested the kidnapper had military training. He must have had the physical strength to carry and keep quiet a 55-pound girl who might be struggling. The profilers believe the perpetrator was a loner, possibly a schizophrenic, who has trouble with the opposite sex. One suspect jumped out again, David Masterson.
When we came up with David Masterson as our most likely suspect, we met a whole lot of opposition from the local police department, as well as the FBI agent. And the reason for the opposition was very reasonable. It was simply that he had been a suspect early on, and they had asked of him to take certain truth tests, and David had passed both of them.
But a schizophrenic can disassociate from reality to such a degree, he might be able to lie without exhibiting any stress, thus beating the tests. The profilers also made a prediction that the kidnapper would telephone Marietta Yeager on the anniversary of the abduction.
We felt that this was such an intimate killer that he had become personally involved in the killing and in the victim and the victim's life and in the victim's family's life, that he would much celebrate this event like a normal person would celebrate an anniversary.
To flush the kidnapper out, Marietta Yeager granted an interview to an Associated Press reporter. She said her religious faith allowed her to feel sorry for the kidnapper and that she would like to talk to him to find out why he did it. On the night of June 24th, 1974, 1 year after Susie vanished, Marietta went to bed, knowing that although she needed it, she would not rest. As she raced to the phone and recorder, she hoped, finally, to get some answers.
Yes, this is.
Exactly 1 year after Susie Yeager vanished from a Montana campground, a man telephoned Susie's mother, Marietta.
Hello?
The first thing he said was, "Is this Susie's mom?" And I mean, then I knew for certain who it was. He said, "This is the man who took her from you 1 year ago to the minute."
Can we have her back?
And then the phone went dead.
What happened? It was him.
The Yeagers were devastated.
Oh, no.
What did he say?
The call was so short, a successful trace was unlikely.
It was him.
Another call, if it should come, would be the only link to their little girl.
Hello?
I was so relieved. I was so relieved. But my mind was spinning, what's going to happen? What can I say? And so in the beginning, I sort of gave the lead to him in the conversation. He had this need to let me know that he was the one who was in control.
I have Susie. She's doing great.
The kidnapper boasted he was too smart to get caught.
Why did you...
About her.
He said he and Susie had been traveling together.
We've been going all over the place, having a great time. People think we're family.
Where is she right now?
Marietta wanted proof that her daughter was alive.
Ma'am,
She wanted to talk to Susie.
fine. You don't need to worry. Like I said, you
The
just need to
kidnapper
stay
said the
calm.
girl was nearby, sleeping in his cabin.
She hasn't had a hair.
By this time, I knew that my husband had notified the FBI. They were trying to trace the call. So I knew it was important to keep him on the phone. I wanted the FBI to get to him before he got away and find out, if I was going to get my little girl back again.
And I will do whatever it takes to
As she
get her
talked,
back.
Marietta Yeager began to take control of the conversation.
Fine with me.
She said she had been praying for him.
Don't pray for me at all.
She said she felt sorry for him.
Is she really still alive?
Her strength and compassion wore the caller down, according to FBI profiler Patrick Mullaney.
Taking care of her.
To be able to contain herself over an hour with the person that she viewed as having her child was beyond belief. The caller initially starting with the typical psychopathic challenge, "I am the one that kidnapped your child 1 year ago to the minute, this day." To turn him from that point where he's really sticking it to her to where at the end of the hour, that caller could not hang up the phone. And when he ultimately did hang up the phone, he was sobbing, crying.
I just came up with anything I could.
Agents responded to the Yeager home, hoping the call would finally lead them to the kidnapper. At the time, long-distance calls passed through a series of relay stations.
You gotta keep me informed.
Telephone personnel traced the call as far as Sarasota, Florida. But a system failure there prevented further tracing. Agents had to tell the Yeagers it didn't work.
Seems to be a problem with the trace. Let me know.
All I could think of was that he had said Susie was asleep in his cabin and we'd lost the chance to find her.
Then, a month later, a rancher in Montana showed investigators where somebody tapped into his telephone line. His phone bill showed a call to the Yeagers in Michigan that he hadn't made. Under the lines, he had noticed fresh tire tracks that did not match his truck tires. When asked for names of people who knew the ranch well, the rancher said David Masterson used to work for him. The investigators recalled Masterson had been a communications specialist in the Marines and would know how to tap the lines. Agents looked into a new technology, voice print analysis. A person's voice is made unique by their body's physical makeup, and scientists had begun charting voice patterns using a sound spectrograph. The voice print experts compared the anniversary call recording to a recording of an interview with Masterson. They reported a match.
How you guys doing today?
Investigators confronted Masterson with the voice print analysis.
Stop by and say hello, see how you're doing. I want you to take a look at this.
They explained the results indicated he had very likely made the anniversary call to the Yeagers. Masterson told Special Agent Pete Dunbar he was unimpressed.
And he said, "Oh, shoot, you know, I've got relatives whose voices sound just exactly like mine." So we asked who they were.
To begin with, I want
Investigators put together a voice lineup consisting of Masterson and the relatives he named.
Ready?
From the ranch where the anniversary call was made, they telephoned the Yeagers.
Yes, it's Marietta. Hi, Pete. Yeah, we're ready.
Each speaker identified himself by a number and read an excerpt of the anniversary call.
I'm number 1. Is this Susie's mom? We went to Lakeside Park in the Southern California Zoo.
I'm number 2.
Is this Susie's mom? We went to Lakeside Park in the Southern California Zoo.
As soon as I heard the second one, I knew that that was the voice that I had heard. You know, that was indelibly etched in my memory. I would not forget that voice.
It was more circumstantial evidence, but still nothing concrete.
Yes. Hello, Mrs. Yeager.
Investigators wanted a confession.
Yes.
We came up with the notion that the only thing that would bring him off target and motivate him to do something that might betray himself ultimately was to put him into a direct confrontation with Marietta Yeager. We requested Marietta Yeager fly all the way back out into the Bozeman area, an area which had nothing but dark memories.
Marietta had always believed that she and Susie's kidnapper would meet.
I felt this must be the opportunity. So I was very grateful for the opportunity to come out and say to him face to face and not just to a voice on the phone that I had forgiven him.
She's an extremely strong person, very different from any victim's mother that I know. And her forgiveness, well, frankly, I think is very much different. Very much different. I know she feels strong about it, and I'm not sure I agree with her.
On the morning of September 12, 1974, Marietta Yeager and David Masterson met at his attorney's office.
Something in the depth of me knew that this was the man. And when I looked into his face, I could tell by his eyes that he was a mentally ill man.
Nice to finally put a face.
Unwavering, Marietta told him she knew he had taken Susie. Masterson insisted he was innocent. They spoke for more than an hour. Marietta trying to get him to admit what he had done, but he never cracked.
Finally, the attorney said, well, I think this is enough. We've given it a fair shot. And so we stood up, and he shook hands with me. But it took all the discipline I had to let go. He was the one. I knew he was the one, and I didn't want him out of my sight.
We'll be right back, Miss Sherry. I'm sorry, I'll be right back.
To keep the pressure on Masterson, Gallatin County deputies put him under 24-hour surveillance. They made no effort to hide the fact that they were watching. The surveillance seemed to amuse him. But on September 24th, the suspect slipped away, according to Deputy Don Houghton.
The team of officers that watched him go into his house, but he didn't come out the following morning. It got to the point that we actually went and knocked on the door, somebody did, and nobody home. We started looking everywhere we knew David frequented, went to his job sites, and there was no David.
While authorities were searching for Masterson, a man called the Yeagers. It was exactly 1 year after the kidnapper had called the first time when Marietta was out.
Ma'am?
The caller identified himself as Mr. Travis.
Stop playing games with us, David.
But as soon as he got on the phone, I knew it was his voice. What he was trying to convince me and the FBI that the real kidnapper was somebody in Salt Lake City, Utah, and not this person, David, who's being considered as a prime suspect here in Montana.
He said he could prove that Susie was alive by putting her on the telephone.
Your daughter's okay? Well, then listen to this.
He's a nice man, Mommy. We are having fun together. He takes me lots of places.
Well, I knew it wasn't Susie's voice. Susie never called me Mommy. She always called me Mama. Then my fear was that he'd bribed a child to speak those words, and that in his sick mind, this child would become Susie, and that he would harm this child, too.
David, that's not
When Marietta kept calling him David, he began to unravel.
I told you my name was Travis.
He blurted out information Marietta discussed with Masterson in Montana.
Yeah,
Things only David would know.
I can prove that I have her.
And so he totally incriminated himself. And when he realized what he did, he said, "You'll never see your little girl alive again." And he slammed down the phone.
Marietta called the FBI. And authorities traced the call to a Salt Lake City motel room, more than 400 miles from Masterson's home. But by the time they arrived, he was gone. After David Masterson eluded surveillance, investigators believed he called Marietta Yeager.
He's a nice
Marietta
man,
heard a
Mommy.
young girl's voice,
Fun together.
but she knew it wasn't Susie.
Susie. I know my daughter's voice.
Gallatin County prosecutor Thomas Olson, who had been hoping for more evidence before an arrest, feared Masterson was more dangerous than ever.
I was in a state of panic. I immediately assumed he had taken another child. And we knew he had to act. We couldn't wait any longer.
When Masterson came back into town, they decided to make the arrest and hoped to find more evidence against him later. He offered no resistance. He had already hired one of the area's top attorneys. Among his personal effects, they discovered stationery from the Salt Lake City motel where the latest call originated, with the name Travis written on it. Authorities executed a search warrant created with the help of FBI profilers, according to Deputy Don Houghton.
They told us that a suspect in this kind of a crime or these kind of crimes would probably keep souvenirs or trophies of his victims. to include everything from jewelry, clothing, to body parts. Our search warrant listed all those items.
Inside the freezer, deputies made a grisly discovery. Packages wrapped in butcher's paper, marked with the initials of the murdered woman, Sandra Marie Smulligan. Then, they found a human hand with 2 severed fingers clutched in its palm. They discussed the evidence with Masterson's attorney, who announced his client had a shocking confession.
The attorney says that David's going to admit to 4 murders, and that hit me like a sledgehammer.
Masterson told them about the 4 killings. They began in 1967. He was a high school senior when he committed the first one. A fellow student had picked a fight with him. One day he spotted the student's brother fishing with a friend. He killed the student's brother for revenge.
Help!
Why the Boy Scout? What did he do?
Masterson said his second murder was when he killed the Boy Scout at the Headwaters campground in 1968.
Kick me out.
He did it to embarrass the local troop that had terminated his participation with the Scouts. His third victim was Susie Yeager. He waited until he thought everyone was asleep. He said he took Susie to the Horseshoe Hills Ranch, where they had found Sandra Smulligan's bones. He strangled her, dismembered her body, and scattered her remains.
Anything special stand out? Just somebody else?
Everyone wanted to know why.
Don't like it, or
Masterson had no answer.
he's just upset?
He also confessed to killing Sandra Smulligan. After she refused to see him again, he broke into her apartment.
Sandra, I want you to keep your mouth shut. Listen to me. Keep your mouth shut. Don't move. You'll be all right.
His plan was to abduct her. But when he covered her mouth with duct tape, he inadvertently covered her nose, too.
If you don't move, it'll all be over here.
As he packed her clothes, Sandra Smulligan suffocated.
Sandra.
At the same ranch, he dismembered her body, then incinerated the remains over a fire of cedar shingles and spread her bones among Susie's.
It was late. I mean, I think it was like 3 a.m. And my lasting vision of David was that as he confessed to 4 murders, he seemed to shrink smaller and smaller in stature and size. And so at the end, he was a shell of a person.
Thanks, sir.
Deputies returned him to jail, but he never made it to trial. Although prosecutors told them they would not seek the death penalty, David Masterson hanged himself with a towel hours after he confessed. In the Pacific Northwest, tragedy would forever bind 3 women who would never meet. One disappeared just months before her wedding. Another vanished, leaving 2 children behind. A third survived her night of terror and spoke for the others she never knew. The hunt for a serial killer led FBI agents cross-country as they followed his deadly trail.
The disappearance of young women triggered a search that spanned the Pacific Northwest. Even a massive media campaign failed to locate the drifter who first charmed, then killed them. As investigators followed his trail, he always stayed one step ahead. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. In a case that landed on the FBI's 10 most wanted list, agents hoped that the one victim the killer spared would help put him behind bars.
March 28th, 1987. LaRon Crouston left a party in the suburbs of Tacoma, Washington at 4 in the morning. He was looking forward to a day of fishing.
Come with me.
LaRon's fiancée, 22-year-old Robin Smith, decided to stay. She was having a good time. Robin assured LaRon she'd be fine.
I love you.
I love you too.
She would just get a ride home from someone she'd met at the party. After fishing all day Saturday, LaRon fell asleep, exhausted. He didn't wake up until early Sunday afternoon.
Robin!
He hadn't seen his fiancée, Robin, since the party 2 days earlier.
Robin!
Concerned, the young man called Robin's mother.
Hello?
Yeah.
Edna Smith had assumed her daughter was with LaRon.
No, let me check just a minute. Robin?
She checked to see if Robin was in her old bedroom.
Robin? No, I haven't seen her.
Perhaps she'd come in late without being heard. LaRon told Edna not to worry.
Okay, I'll be there in a few
Maybe
minutes.
Robin
right?
had decided to spend the rest of the weekend at their friend's house. About an hour later, LaRon and Robin's brother arrived at the apartment.
No one there. Yeah. I don't guess we have any choice.
With no sign of Robin, her family decided to call police. LaRon joined the Smiths at their house to wait for detectives from the Pierce County Sheriff's Office. They were all worried. Robin had never done anything like this before. They described Robin as a happy young woman, though quiet. She worked long hours as a waitress, saving most of her money to help pay for her upcoming wedding. Detective Terry Wilson and his partner initiated an investigation.
Per information we received from her mother, Miss Smith, it was unlike Robin to have just walked up and taken off. She was engaged to get married. She was close to her family. And every time she ever went any place her family was, she usually told them where she was going to be at. And so this was unlike her.
LaRon Crouston told detectives about the last night he'd seen Robin. Early in the morning of March 28th, Robin and LaRon hung out at a bar until it closed at 2 a.m. Some people they had met during the evening invited them to an after-hours party at their nearby apartment. The place was rented by Elizabeth Glynn and Darren D. O'Neill. LaRon and Robin were having such a good time they didn't want it to end. The last place LaRon had seen Robin was at the party.
Before you got to the tent, what time did you go?
Detective Wilson went to the duplex where the party had been held. He found Elizabeth Glynn at home. She corroborated LaRon's story and told the detective that she had intended to drive Robin home.
How long did you leave?
But as the night wore on, her plans changed. Darren seemed more interested in Robin, so Elizabeth remained in the kitchen and flirted with a man named Mike Prohoda. Elizabeth told the detective that she and Prohoda had made plans to meet later at his apartment where they could be alone. Brahota left the party first to avoid arousing Darren's suspicions. By daybreak, Darren D. O'Neill hardly seemed to notice. He was wrapped up telling Robin about his favorite author, Louis L'Amour, who wrote stories about the Wild West. O'Neill was unemployed and talked about living off the land like the outdoorsman in L'Amour's books. Elizabeth had heard it all before. At about 8 a.m., she left the apartment to meet Brahota. She told O'Neill and Robin she was going out to buy more beer. When she returned 24 hours later, O'Neill and Robin were gone. Elizabeth pointed out that she found several items missing from the apartment.
In searching the apartment, we found that there was a television that had been pulled out and the television electrical cord had been removed. There was a couple of lamps from his girlfriend had told us that had extension cords on it. These were missing. A lot of his clothes were gone, and she specifically mentioned that there was a blanket that also was missing from the house.
Is this yours?
In a file box, Wilson also found Social Security cards with several different aliases. They included the unusual name of Zebulon McCranahan. When Detective Wilson told his partner what he'd learned, Detective Walt Stout immediately suspected foul play.
Robin was left alone with Darren O'Neill, and something happened at that residence after that. It would be speculation that maybe Darren tried to come on to her physically or sexually. She may have rejected that, or there was something that happened there, and I believe she was probably assaulted in that house.
Detectives next questioned Dennis Morrison, O'Neill's friend and former employer. Morrison said O'Neill had worked for him as a carpenter.
When's the last time you saw him?
It was last night. He asked if we're alone.
He said he had seen O'Neill just a few days earlier. It was Saturday afternoon, the day after the all-night party.
Running kind of low on cash, man. You ain't got about 30 bucks I can get from you.
O'Neill stopped by to ask for traveling money. He said he was heading east over the Cascade Mountains. Morrison had no cash to give him. O'Neill was about to leave when Morrison realized he could write him a check. He went to O'Neill's car to make the offer. His friend seemed nervous and anxious to leave. Then a movement in the back of the car caught Morrison's eye. It looked like something was pushing against the back seat from inside the trunk. O'Neill told him it was his dog. He put it there to punish it. Before Morrison could say another word, O'Neill pulled away.
That's all he said. You haven't heard from him since.
Morrison described the car as a tan Chrysler with Montana tags.
It was the day after the party.
Authorities knew they were 3 days behind O'Neill. By now, he could be anywhere. Detectives continued to pursue the handful of O'Neill's known contacts in the area. They called Gary Skinner, the owner of another cabinet shop where O'Neill had worked part-time. He told detectives he had been looking for Darren O'Neill since his last day at work.
When Darren left, he apparently took a hammer with him from the shop because it was missing, and Mr. Skinner couldn't account for it having been taken in any other way.
With no leads pointing to his whereabouts, Pierce County detectives hoped O'Neill's past would provide some answers. A background check revealed that the suspect was no stranger to trouble.
He had warrants out for him. He had been in trouble in Colorado. He had been accused of sexual assault, physical assault. All of his victims that we were aware of had been females. So a profile of him was starting to form that we was looking for a person who is Possibly predatory in nature, but violent for sure.
Pierce County deputies entered everything they knew about Darren D. O'Neill into the National Crime Information Database, the NCIC, a listing of criminals and victims nationwide. They included his physical characteristics, a description of his tattoos, and the make and model of his car. If O'Neill were picked up by any police department in the country, Pierce County would be notified immediately. Detectives also helped Robin's family launch a media campaign to locate the missing woman. Robin's picture was posted all over the Tacoma, Washington area, along with O'Neill's. The campaign began to generate leads. O'Neill was spotted entering a local hospital alone on March 29th.
There was no security at the hospital, but the ER nurses were nervous at this man's presence. So they did call a couple of male employees of the hospital, and Darren ultimately left without receiving any treatment for some scratches that were visible.
Investigators believed Robin had inflicted the scratches on O'Neill's face when he attacked her. The hospital staff told police that the scruffy man bore a teardrop tattoo at the corner of one eye. The letters J-U-N-E were tattooed across the knuckles of one hand. Detectives learned that June was the name of O'Neill's ex-wife. The media campaign continued to generate leads. A highway flagman had seen O'Neill in his car at 2 different locations on March 30th, 2 days after Robin's disappearance. The first sighting was on a highway construction site east of Tacoma.
Construction, just keep it slow.
O'Neill was heading south when the flagman waved him through.
Keep it slow, sir.
He also saw O'Neill a few hours later at a gas station off the same highway.
Hang on a second, I want you to take a look at some pictures.
He called police when he recognized the man's face from the newspaper. To be sure, the detective showed the flagman a photo lineup. It included a mugshot of O'Neill alongside 5 others. The flagman picked out O'Neill immediately. As investigators continued the hunt, a Washington state trooper spotted a tan Chrysler with Montana tags on the afternoon of March 30th. The same day the flagman had seen O'Neill. It had been abandoned on the side of Interstate 5, about 50 miles north of Pierce County, 2 days after Robin's disappearance. Unaware of the ongoing investigation, the officer found nothing suspicious about the car. He followed proper procedure by calling in the license plate and vehicle description. A communications officer entered the tag number into a database. The information should have triggered the NCIC listing on O'Neill and his vehicle. It did not. She had mistakenly typed the abbreviation MO for the state of Missouri instead of MT for Montana. The trooper on Highway 5 was still unaware that this was the very car Darren D. O'Neill had been driving following Robin Smith's disappearance. Investigators' best clue was about to be towed to the impound lot. On March 30th, 1987, a Washington state trooper found a tan Chrysler with Montana tags 50 miles east of Tacoma. Misinformed by his communications officer, the trooper was unaware that Darren D. O'Neill, the man wanted in connection with the disappearance of Robin Smith, had abandoned the car. The vehicle was towed to an impound lot for future sale. A few days later, the local paper ran an article about Robin Smith's abduction. The story described O'Neill's car. It sounded similar to a Chrysler the tow truck operator had recently impounded. He checked the make, model, and license plate. They matched. He quickly notified police. Detectives ran a check of the Chrysler's vehicle ID number. A man calling himself Zebulon McCranahan was reported to have stolen it from an Idaho residence in 1986. Wilson immediately remembered the peculiar name from an ID card he'd found at O'Neill's home. It was one of the suspect's aliases. At the Pierce County West Precinct garage, detectives and evidence technicians processed the Chrysler. They hoped to find some trace evidence linking O'Neill or Robin to the car. While technicians searched the interior, the detectives moved to the trunk. They found a large quantity of dried blood. Detectives also found a blood-stained lavender jacket. Mrs. Smith later identified the garment as Robin's. They also recovered teeth, bone chips, and a clump of hair. O'Neill's fingerprints on empty beer cans pointed to his involvement. If Detective Wilson had held out some slim hope that Robin was still alive, it was now gone.
We felt now that we probably had a homicide on our hands by the way the type of blood that was found in the trunk and the amount of blood that was found. And so we started focusing on Darren as a homicide suspect. And at this point in time, the whole tone of the investigation started changing.
But to charge O'Neill with murder, examiners at the Washington State Forensics Lab first needed to confirm that the hair and bone fragments belonged to Robin Smith. Pierce County sheriffs requested Robin's dental records and blood types sent to the lab. But there was a problem. Robin had not been to the dentist since childhood. She also had never documented her blood type. Since a definitive match with known samples could not be made, murder charges could not be filed. As the hunt for suspected killer Darren D. O'Neill ground to an abrupt halt, 120 miles to the north, Detective Carlotta Jarrett of the Bellingham, Washington Police Department was working on a similar case. Wendy Ohi, a 28-year-old single mother, was reported missing when she failed to pick up her daughter. Wendy had a date the evening of April 24th, 1987. She left her daughter with the child's grandmother. When Wendy failed to return her call, the grandmother drove over to her house to find the little girl's favorite pillow. On Wendy's bed, she found bloodstains and called the police. Detective Jarrett obtained a warrant to search the house. Wendy's car, a red Ford Torino, was missing. The front door to Wendy's house had been left unlocked. Her wallet and keys were missing. In the bedroom, Detective Jarrett found evidence of a brutal attack.
There was bodily fluids in the bed, and there was a great amount of pooled blood underneath that pillow, which had seeped to the mattress below. There was low to medium impact velocity blood spatters on a wall, and there were also blood smears on the wall.
Bellingham police retrieved the entire bed as evidence. On the headboard, they found more of Wendy's blood, along with 2 blonde hairs that did not belong to the missing woman. Police also recovered an acrylic fingernail. Wendy's friends told police that she had worn acrylic nails on her date with a man named Michael Johnson. Wendy had met Johnson earlier that afternoon on her lunch break. He was the new bartender at La Paloma restaurant. Detective Jarrett checked the restaurant for leads.
I contacted the owner to see if she'd filled out an employment application for Mr. Johnson, and the only thing she had was a placemat that he had written some information on. She gave that placemat to me, and we did process it for fingerprints.
While the detective waited for results, she visited a local mission which the bartender had listed on the placemat as his residence. Detective Jarrett spoke to the desk clerk at the mission, who remembered the day Johnson checked out.
He had seen Mr. Johnson at the mission at 7:30 in the morning on the day after that Wendy he had a date with him. And at that time he was wearing black slacks, a vest, a white shirt and a tie, and told him he was going to work. He also said he had met a lady and he was going to move in with her. This person also said that Mr. Johnson was driving a red Torino and drove away in it. Previous to this point, he'd had no vehicle.
On May 4th, 1987, Jarrett received a phone call from police in Eugene, Oregon. They had found Wendy's car, a red Ford Torino, abandoned in the parking lot of a tavern. Inside, police recovered fingerprints that matched the fingerprints found on the placemat. A check through the automated fingerprint identification system revealed that the prints belonged to Darren D. O'Neill, the man wanted for the suspected murder of Robin Smith. Detective Jarrett contacted authorities in Pierce County, 120 miles south of Bellingham. They quickly realized there were striking similarities in both cases.
Since we were convinced that Darren O'Neill was responsible for Robin Smith's death, and we also felt that he was responsible for Wendy Ahi's disappearance and possible death, we felt that the rest of the people in the country were also at great risk from Darren O'Neill.
Pierce County deputies called in the FBI to assist in the hunt. Former Special Agent Del Oros of the FBI's Tacoma resident agency was assigned the case.
At that point, we knew we were dealing with an individual who was extremely mobile and extremely dangerous. He had the history of a violent sexual predator, and now he had the current tag or label of a murderer.
Since Wendy and Robin's bodies were still missing, formal murder charges were not filed. Sexual assault charges against O'Neill were still pending in Colorado. The FBI opened a federal case against the fugitive for unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. Still, O'Neill managed to stay one step ahead. No one knew where the suspected serial killer fled after he left Oregon. And authorities still had no murder case unless they found the bodies of the missing women. In May 1987, evidence pointed to the brutal slaying of 2 innocent women in Washington state. The FBI and local police launched a media campaign to flush out suspected killer Darren D. O'Neill. Dozens of agents fanned out to investigate sightings all over the Pacific Northwest.
Yes.
O'Neill was spotted hitchhiking at truck stops north and south of Seattle. One trucker gave O'Neill a ride on May 23rd. He claimed his passenger thanked him for the ride because the cops were after him. The trucker pulled off the highway a short time later and left O'Neill just a few miles outside the city. Special Agent Del Oros recalled that even as leads came in, the hunt for the elusive killer did not get any easier.
The months immediately following the disappearance of Robin Smith and Wendy Ahi were extremely frustrating. Because of O'Neill's change in facial appearance, a change in weight, people were consistently telling us that the pictures that we were showing of O'Neill were actually two different people. Well, they weren't.
The FBI focused on places the drifter might blend in. Because O'Neill was constantly on the move, agents questioned travelers at local bus and train stations. They hoped someone had spotted O'Neill and would remember his distinctive tattoos. Even when they found people who had seen the fugitive, it was always too late. O'Neill was comfortable in the ever-changing world of transients and drifters, where people could easily disappear forever.
It wasn't as though we were going to find Darren O'Neill at the local Ramada Inn. It forced us to take a hard look at the reality of having to search for him in places where he would blend in very, very easily. By way of example, we looked in bus stops, homeless shelters, day labor camps. He was certainly not anyone who was going to be holding a 9-to-5 job, which really did increase the difficulty in trying to find him as the pursuit went on through the subsequent months.
While agents and detectives continued to pursue hundreds of mostly false sightings, detectives were called to the rural area surrounding Crystal Mountain, just east of Washington State's Mount Rainier. Hikers had reported finding what appeared to be human remains. The location was close to where a flagman had seen O'Neill's car about a month earlier, not long after Robin Smith's disappearance. Just inside the wood line, officers spotted a jawbone and a skull. Each item was carefully flagged before it was retrieved. As Stout and Wilson surveyed the crime scene, they wondered whether the remains were Robin's. Investigators also found other bones scattered in the vicinity. Folded clothing was found, hidden in the base of a nearby tree. It matched the description of the outfit Robin had worn to the party. They also recovered a wallet. Inside, they found Robin Smith's driver's license. Investigators fanned out to cover a wide area. Their persistence paid off. They found a claw hammer with markings similar to the one reported missing by one of O'Neill's former employers. Detectives also suspected it was the murder weapon. The Pierce County medical examiner agreed. A careful examination of the remains revealed that Robin had probably died as the result of blunt force trauma to the head. Darren D. O'Neill was charged with first-degree murder.
Once the remains of Robin Smith were found, we certainly had the confirmation that a murder had occurred. And by virtue of that murder, the Washington federal authorities then issued their own separate and second investigation. They issued another unlawful flight to avoid prosecution warrant for him.
The FBI was more determined than ever to get their hands on the man responsible for this heinous crime. By June of 1987, the FBI had issued 2 federal warrants for the arrest of suspected serial killer Darren D. O'Neill, still on the loose in the Pacific Northwest. The remains of one woman had been recovered close to Mount Rainier. The second woman was still missing and presumed dead. Since O'Neill was last known to be in Eugene, Oregon, Special Agent Michael Elsey of the FBI's Portland field office was called in.
Knowing that he was a sexual predator, I went and checked with the local police agencies with some of their sexual assault cases to see if his MO fit any of, or description or anything fit any of their pending cases.
Special Agent O'Donnell, Detective Smith said
It meant hundreds of man-hours, but agents refused to simply wait for another sighting or another victim. Dozens of agents met with detectives in districts across the region to try to link O'Neill to outstanding sexual assault cases. The search was complicated by the fact that O'Neill looked very different in each of his mugshots. Most often, the agents left empty-handed. Frustrated and out of leads, agents continued to wade through hundreds of old case files. With a dangerous predator on the prowl, agents had to exhaust every possibility. An agent met with police detective Bill Carter in Portland. As he had done a dozen times before, the agent compared O'Neill's picture to sketches of sexual predators. One sketch stood out. It bore a strong resemblance to the fugitive. A 14-year-old girl named Heidi Lang had provided the drawing 5 months earlier when she filed rape charges against her unknown attacker. From the police report, her description of the crime sounded eerily similar to O'Neill's other assaults.
From looking at the photos of Mr. O'Neill, especially when he had a beard and the glasses, I saw that there was quite a bit of resemblance between the two, and the method and MO were similar as well. Luckily, he did not kill Miss Lang, as he had other subjects.
Agent Elsie wanted to speak with Heidi Lang as soon as possible. Detective Carter arranged a meeting between the young girl and the FBI.
12 o'clock, a little bit after.
With her mother by her side, she told the story from the beginning. At around midnight on January 17, 1987, 2 months before Robin Smith disappeared, Heidi broke her mother's curfew and walked to the nearby convenience store to get a soda. It was a tough part of town. The young girl had walked it many times before, but never this late at night. As she crossed an overpass leading to the store, a trucker called to her from his parked rig. She ignored him and walked on. It only took her a few minutes to get the soda. Then she started back home. She walked as quickly as she could to get back before her mother knew she had left. Heidi told investigators that as she approached the overpass, the man and the truck were gone. But on the other side of the overpass, the trucker jumped out of the bushes and grabbed her.
Get in the truck!
He forced her down an embankment at knife point and shoved her into his semi parked at the side of the highway. Years later, Heidi recalls that she believed her young life was over.
The first thing I noticed is how dangerous he was. I felt that he had every intention of killing me. There was no question in my mind.
Get him back!
He threw her into the sleeper compartment of his truck. She was terrified, with no idea where he might take her or what he might do.
He threatened to make me a whore, sell me to pimps. He was gonna cut me open if I tried finding what was going to keep from angering this man. I had to behave like I was just holding conversation with him, and at the same time learn what I could about him.
Despite Heidi's best efforts, the trucker climbed into the sleeper compartment and repeatedly raped the 14-year-old for 4 hours.
And he did not like to think of you as a woman. That brought him to violence. I had to keep him talking, mostly to keep his mind off other things. And I tried my best to give him the impression that I was insignificant. And I was just there to be there with him. And it wouldn't mean anything if he let me go.
Heidi's insight and courage paid off. After suffering hours of abuse, her tormentor let her go. She ran until she reached a truck stop. She asked an employee for a ride home. After all she'd been through, Heidi bravely submitted to a rape test. This provided investigators with samples of the rapist's semen, though no match could be made until the suspect was in custody. When Heidi finished her story, Detective Carter showed her a number of photos of O'Neill and some similar-looking men.
It was amazing that he was in it, and I did see him. And I picked him out. I really did not expect to see him in them. I hadn't really heard anything since I had given the sketch.
Seeing her attacker's face brought the memories flooding back, but she never hesitated to press charges. Heidi was determined to face her rapist and put him behind bars.
I think that she wanted to see that this person did not do that to anyone else ever again. And so it showed very much strength in her character, and especially at the age of 14, being able to be so descriptive in the events that occurred, the description of the subject and him, that kind of got us to the path where we were.
Agent Elsie called the Tacoma office. They finally had a witness to testify against O'Neill.
He had run other places,
but they still had to find him. Agent Del Oros called FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C. to request additional assistance. On June 18, 1987, Darren D. O'Neill's name was placed on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. The case was now a priority for every FBI office in the country. Agents had to find O'Neill before he could strike again. In June of 1987, suspected serial killer Darren D. O'Neill was added to the FBI's 10 most wanted list. Special Agent Del Oros was in charge of the case. He convinced the FBI's Fugitive Publicity Unit in Washington, D.C. that Darren D. O'Neill fit the list's criteria.
The Bureau's determination as to who goes on to the top 10 wanted list is a function of a lot of different factors. Primarily, it's the protection of the community. Secondarily, it has to do with the ability of those individuals to be mobile, to transport themselves across interstate lines, so effectively going from state to state.
With nationwide publicity, the manhunt for O'Neill was relentless. Countless sightings were reported in several states. O'Neill was most often spotted in bars and taverns in the Northwest.
Looking for a guy may have been seen around here.
Investigators followed up on dozens of leads, only to find witnesses with vague descriptions of the fugitive. Nobody knew of his whereabouts.
Anything noticeable about his appearance?
Agents were left with little to go on.
Okay, thank you very much.
So we had a long stretch of time when the clues were drying up. The leads from other agents were not producing any form of immediate return. We were going back and to the same people, consistently re-interviewing the family, friends. We were reaching out as far as going to prior instructors, prior employers, looking for some type of clue that would tell us or show us a pattern of his activity and his mobility across the country.
7 months later, on February 3rd, 1988, agents discovered that O'Neill had made his way to Lakeland, Florida. He was spotted by a Lakeland police officer conducting what appeared to be a drug deal.
Got some good stuff. You got the money?
The officer was unaware that O'Neill was wanted for murder. O'Neill noticed the cop but did nothing. The officer turned his car around to investigate. When the cruiser pulled past the stopped car, O'Neill pulled up and asked for directions, pretending he was lost. The officer asked him to pull over. Instead, O'Neill took off. The officer followed, calling in the Louisiana tags on O'Neill's car as he drove. O'Neill tried to lose him, zigzagging through the streets of Lakeland. When their car jumped a curb, the suspects ran.
On foot, chasing a white male.
The officer pursued on foot and eventually caught them all.
Your car, where you at in your car?
O'Neill was extradited to Louisiana when police learned the car he'd been driving was reported stolen from that state. When asked, O'Neill told police his name was Jean Mailloux.
A clerk who was working nights compared the fingerprints of the individual that she knew as Jean Mailloux to the list of fingerprints associated with FBI top 10 wanted fugitives and found that the individual that she knew as Jean Mailloux was the individual that we knew as Darren O'Neill.
O'Neill was extradited to Washington State to face charges. But state prosecutors knew their cases were weak. Since Wendy Augie's body was never recovered, O'Neill could not be charged with her murder. The Robin Smith case was stronger, but lacked definitive forensic identification. It would be difficult to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the body found in the woods was Robin Smith's. Despite the evidentiary obstacles, prosecutors moved ahead with the Robin Smith case. They would take their chances with a jury. O'Neill and his attorney would never let the case get that far. In a Pierce County court on January 4th, 1989, O'Neill pled guilty to first-degree murder in the killing of Robin Smith. Detective Wilson knew there was an ulterior motive behind the plea.
The court system in the state of Washington at that time was if a person was convicted of first-degree murder, but there was a loophole in there. If you pled guilty to the charge, the maximum time you got was 333 months.
The family of Robin Smith was devastated. Even without parole, O'Neill would be free well before the end of his natural life. The killers still face charges in Portland, Oregon for the kidnapping and rape of 14-year-old Heidi Lang. If convicted, O'Neill would be put away for life. But prosecutors had a problem. Deputy District Attorney Charles Sparks recalls that the rape kit Heidi had provided at the time of her assault would not be admissible for a comparison with O'Neill.
There was a sexual assault kit that included vaginal swabs that were taken, and that had molded because of the way these things were stored back then, and it was not usable. And DNA evidence would have been very helpful, but we just didn't have it.
On May 16, 1990, as O'Neill's trial began, prosecutors knew their only chance was to put Heidi on the witness stand to face her attacker. It would be traumatic for her, but it was their best hope for putting O'Neill behind bars for good.
So it was very difficult for me to testify at the trial. It was even more difficult to look at him face to face. It was very frightening, very scary experience. First of all, at this point, I had promised this man that I wouldn't tell anybody what happened. And this is a man who had no qualms about going after anybody, even just a girl walking down the street in the middle of the night. I knew I had to put him away, or I was as good as dead. That's the way I view it.
From here today, could you point to that man?
Heidi pointed out the man who had kidnapped and raped her, sitting sullenly just a few yards in front of her. Her testimony was enough to convict O'Neill. The jury found him guilty on all 16 counts of kidnapping and rape. Under Oregon law, he was sentenced to 135 years in prison. Darren D. O'Neill is serving his first sentence of 27 years at a Washington State penitentiary. He will then be transferred to Oregon to spend the rest of his life behind bars.
Once he was convicted, I was able to put a lot of this in the past. I was able to put it away. And that was most important to me. That's the most, I don't think I would have ever gotten over this if we hadn't put him away.
For Agent Oros, though he has since left the FBI to serve as Deputy District Attorney in Sacramento, California, the case remains fresh in his mind.
Well, to this very day, I still have the wanted flyer for Darren O'Neill hanging in my office here at the District Attorney's office. He, even on the wall, is a constant reminder of the dangers that face each and every one of us as we go out on the street. I'm particularly aware of the fact that he represents a significant danger to the women in society. He's an individual that was a cold, calculated murder, and he reaffirms for me that I'm in a profession that matters, and that every day when I go into court, I'm there to make a difference.
Two deadly fugitives are on the run from justice. Authorities follow an electronic trail and chase the escaped convict and his partner from state to state. The suspects are moving fast, determined to avoid capture. The police and FBI must track them down before they take another life.
In Pennsylvania, an inmate escaped with the help of his female accomplice. Following a trail of fraudulent credit card receipts and death, authorities track the pair, but always find themselves one step behind. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. The FBI and police race to capture the deadly couple, who seem to be running with no direction, no sense of fear, and nothing to lose.
10-7 investigation, Eddie and Bo.
September 25th, 1993. Friends of 74-year-old Guy Goodman contact the Palmyra, Pennsylvania police. They're concerned because they have not heard from him in over a week. Goodman's landlord meets an officer at his rented house.
You have a key for the door there?
I do.
Okay, let's go check it out.
Okay.
You just want to step back there?
All right.
The officer observes shards of broken porcelain on the floor and dried blood on the floor and walls. Blood spatter trails down the hall and leads to the basement stairs. In a storage room, he discovers a body. The officer calls for assistance.
Headquarters, code 3, requesting backup.
24-8, clear call.
Unit 1833, go ahead.
Detective Paul Zeckman of the Lebanon County Detective Bureau takes the lead in the investigation.
Affirm, go ahead.
10-4, I'll be en route to that location.
The countywide bureau helps township police departments with major crime investigations.
It was evident that the house had been ransacked. The kitchen drawers were open, things were strewn around on the floor. Going down into the basement area, you could see drag marks led from the stairway to a small storage room.
The crime scene is gruesome. The victim's hands and feet are tied behind his back. Several layers of plastic bags, sheets, and blankets enshroud his head. Coverings are tightened at his neck with makeshift bindings.
These items were either duct taped or tied with electrical cords. The plastic bag was duct taped over the cloth covering.
Hoping to find a trace of the perpetrator, crime scene investigators carefully process the house. They dust every surface for latent fingerprints and collect a roll of duct tape left on a table. Likely the same tape used in the bindings. With no witnesses, only the careful examination of every item can help the detectives understand this crime.
We were trying to not only obtain the forensic evidence, but we were also trying to determine if any of the property was taken from the residence. We were able to establish that Mr. Goodman's wallet was missing.
They find American Express charge statements, but the card itself is missing.
Statement here. The account numbers get that over.
In the bedroom, investigators discover an open box of checks.
A series of checks from the middle of this box had been removed. We also knew that the vehicle of Mr. Goodman was also missing at this point. What do you have to do out here yet?
Guy Goodman seemed like an unlikely target for this type of attack. Like most of the Palmyra, Pennsylvania community, Chief Michael Wayman knew of the victim.
Guy Goodman was a retired florist. He was a lifelong resident of the Palmyra area, well known within the community and liked by everyone in the community. It was apparent that either the motive for this crime was a robbery that had gone bad, or that there was a robbery after the fact, after Mr. Goodman was assaulted and died.
Palmyra, Pennsylvania is located in Lebanon County. This peaceful community sees fewer than 3 murders per year. In most cases, the victim knows the killer. At the autopsy, the victim's face is unrecognizable. The medical examiner uses dental records to confirm it is Guy Goodman. Based on the body's decomposition, he concludes Goodman has been dead for about a week. Although the victim was severely beaten, his wounds were not fatal. An examination of his respiratory tract reveals he died slowly from suffocation. Latent prints recovered from Goodman's house are processed at the lab. Examiners check the prints against local arrest records and find a match. When the forensics report arrives on Zekman's desk, he isn't surprised by the results.
Fingerprints that we had obtained at the crime scene matched Bradley Martin.
Zekman knows the name all too well.
I just entered him as a wanted person, charging him with the escape from the county prison, so I knew he was on the run.
Many of Lebanon County's inmates are part of a work release program. Bradley Martin, a repeat thief and drug user, is one of these work release prisoners. Over a week earlier, Martin used a 2-hour pass, a weekly perk of the work release program, to meet his new girlfriend, Carolyn King. 27-year-old King worked at a factory where she met the 21-year-old work release prisoner. When Martin failed to return, prison officials launched a fugitive investigation. They called the Lebanon County Detective Bureau. After obtaining a fugitive warrant for Martin, the detectives checked Carolyn King's apartment, concerned for her well-being. But King is not there, and they find nothing to indicate where she has gone, or even if she is with Martin. The detectives entered Martin in NCIC, the National Criminal Information Center. Once the murder of Guy Goodman is discovered, there is a greater urgency to find Martin than to determine if Carolyn King is unharmed. The detectives interview Martin's friends and co-workers. What they learn surprises them.
Through interviews, we were able to establish that Bradley Martin and Carolyn King were together several days after Guy Goodman was murdered. We were able to establish that they were together in the Palmyra area, and then it was just blank.
Detectives face the possibility that Carolyn King may be Martin's accomplice. Earlier, when Detective Zekman ran a statewide background check on King, she came up clean. He tries again, this time using a national database. He learns she has a long criminal history, including theft and check forgery. She has outstanding warrants for her arrest and is also a suspect in 2 murders in Virginia. The detectives have no idea where the 2 suspects are. If they left town right after the Goodman murder, they have more than a week's head start. Detectives hope to track the suspects using the American Express charge card and the checks stolen from the victim's home.
Okay, let me call the guy at the American Express Security Department.
That's great.
Detective Wayman asks American Express Global Security in New York to help. Joe Gannon, the chief investigator in Amex Security, works to assist the police.
And I'll be back to you as soon as I can. Got it. Thanks. We flagged Mr. Goodman's account because he was the victim of a homicide, and the chances were that the perpetrators of that homicide were in possession of that card.
A review of Goodman's account shows purchases made after Goodman's death. The transactions leave a trail that may lead to Goodman's killer.
we discovered that the charges began in western Pennsylvania and continued out through the Ohio Valley, down into Iowa and Kansas, and then they turned north. And the last transaction we had on record was in Rapid City, South Dakota.
Armed with a solid lead, the Pennsylvania detectives waste no time. They catch the next available flight to Rapid City, South Dakota. The killers had disappeared. But the victim's charge card had become the investigators' best informant. Police hope the trail of surfacing transactions will lead them to the murderers. Within hours, the Pennsylvania detectives arrive in Rapid City. Accompanied by local police, they visit the last stores where the charge card was used. Interviews with clerks verify their suspicions.
Up until this point, we were speculating that Bradley Martin and Carolyn King were the two people that were using Goodman's American Express card.
Then, investigators catch their first real break.
Some of the individuals were able to identify Bradley Martin as the user of the card. Some were able to identify Carolyn King as the user of the card.
The revelation confirms their theory.
It was no longer a whodunit. We knew for certain who had done it. Now it was a matter of changing the focus of the investigation as to apprehending them.
The Pennsylvania detectives circulate photos and detailed information about the suspects to all South Dakota law enforcement agencies. The Rapid City Police Fraud Unit, or Bunko Squad, tells them of an interracial couple who've been passing bad checks at local stores.
Rapid City Police Department had a black and white bunco team who were trying to do a con game within the area. It was a black female and a white male driving a vehicle with Virginia plates. We knew that this fit the description of Carolyn King and Bradley Martin. We knew that Carolyn King had a vehicle with Virginia plates. We felt that they were there working in the Rapid City area.
Driver's license registration, please.
The Pennsylvania detectives assist as Rapid City police pull over the couple in the car with Virginia plates. They confirm the couple is the team Rapid City detectives have been hunting, but not the suspected killers.
The black female and the white male were in fact not Martin and King. They were just simply another couple that matched the description and who were doing their own criminal activities.
American Express informs the detectives there have been no new charges in over a week. The investigation appears to be back at the beginning with no leads.
Okay, what I can do for you is give you...
But King and Martin are having trouble using their murder victims' out-of-state checks.
Let me get my manager for you, ma'am.
They need another source of cash. Their next victim, a 59-year-old woman traveling alone, Donna Martz.
What are you doing?
The terrified woman complies when they force her to take them to her car. The next day, the Pennsylvania detectives learn that someone passed several of Guy Goodman's checks in North Dakota.
The bank had cleared checks written in a number of locations in the Bismarck, North Dakota area.
This supports the detectives' theory.
They had used the credit card. Now they were utilizing the checks stolen from Guy Goodman at the time of his homicide that further validated that they had to have been the persons who committed the homicide.
Detective Allender, please.
Zeckman phones authorities in Bismarck from the road.
I'm Sergeant Zeckman from Lebanon County, Pennsylvania. I made contact with a detective within the Bismarck Police Department. I told him of locations that I had had checks passed, and I gave him a rundown of the Guy Goodman homicide and who was involved and what evidence we had discovered up to this point. And there was a long pause from the detective. And I asked him what was wrong, and he said, well, we're investigating a missing persons from that same hotel where one of these Goodman checks were passed.
Donna Martz's family called police when she did not return home from Bismarck. They described Martz and her Chrysler New Yorker. Police combed Bismarck for any sign of Martz or her car, but find nothing. The detectives fear Martin and King have grabbed Donna Martz. The case has a new urgency. A woman's life is at stake. Police investigate the death of 74-year-old retired florist Guy Goodman, who was severely beaten, then murdered in his rural Pennsylvania home. Investigators determined that the victim's charge card and a book of checks were stolen. Fingerprints at the scene identify two likely perpetrators: 21-year-old Bradley Martin and his 27-year-old girlfriend, Carolyn King. Pennsylvania detectives Paul Zeckman and Michael Wayman follow the pair of fugitives to Bismarck, North Dakota, and learn authorities there are investigating the disappearance of a woman from the same hotel where one of Goodman's checks was passed. Donna Martz, a traveling tour guide for an interstate bus line, was last seen at the hotel where the suspects were staying. When Martz didn't arrive home as scheduled, her family reported her missing. Local authorities issue an APB on Martz's Chrysler New Yorker. The Bismarck FBI joins the case, led by Special Agent Craig Welkin.
The FBI and the North Dakota Bureau of Criminal Investigation set up a task force which was joined by other agencies, including the Bismarck Police Department and the local Sheriff's Department.
When the Pennsylvania detectives arrive in Bismarck, they share the information on the fugitives that they gathered over the past week.
They became an integral part of the task force on this case. The linking of King and Martin was very critical in the investigation.
With potential suspects identified in the abduction of Donna Martz, the task force still struggles for viable leads. They continue to search the hotel.
We spoke with the clerks at the hotel in Bismarck where Donna Martz was last seen. And they were able to tell us that Bradley Martin and Carolyn King had stayed at the same hotel.
Hotel personnel also recall that around 9 a.m. on September 26th, King and Donna Martz were only a few feet apart.
They were able to confirm that Carolyn King had been in the lobby at the same time that Donna Martz was in the small dining area having her continental breakfast.
No one noticed Martz leaving the hotel with anyone, but investigators fear she's been kidnapped. Now they need to find out where the fugitives went next. Then, police discover Guy Goodman's car, abandoned, outside Bismarck. There is no sign of Donna Martz. And the search reveals only receipts from stores along the suspect's route and several unused checks bearing Goodman's name. Once again, the suspects have left authorities with no leads. FBI Special Agent Craig Welkin knows they must find Martz before her kidnappers decide to kill her.
Everybody in an investigation like this is extremely busy. Lots of information coming in, including information that really is extraneous, but you don't know that at the time. So there's a lot of sifting and sorting of information, a lot of trying to prioritize and make sure that your primary emphasis is in the right direction to recover the victim alive and well and apprehend the suspects.
Sleepless hours pass with no leads. Then, a break. Working with Donna Martz's bank, detectives learn her credit card was used in a shopping mall more than 100 miles away.
She had no relatives out there. There was just absolutely no reason for her to go that way.
The MO matches that of Goodman's killers.
Mart's credit card started showing charges on it a day or so after she had gone missing. We were fairly certain that she was not the one doing the charges.
The FBI dispatches teams to interview sales clerks at the mall. None of the clerks can positively identify Martin or King as the user of the card. But they are sure Martz did not make the purchases, which were for young men's clothing.
When you're working the case, you become very much aware that the clock is working against you, particularly when you have a situation like this where we know that Guy Goodman was murdered.
The next significant lead comes when Martz's account posts a withdrawal in Montana. It occurred days earlier at an ATM in the small town of Shelby. Montana FBI agents bring the ATM surveillance tape to the command post in Bismarck. Detectives Wayman and Zeckman positively identify Bradley Martin using Martz's credit card. It is the first definitive proof linking the suspects to Donna Martz. The tape confirms Martin and King traveled west, but there is still no sign of Martz. The evidence is building. Yet investigators' main concern is not prosecution, but finding Donna alive.
And although we had an ideal that they were heading in a general direction of west, they could change that direction at any time. So it was very frustrating because we felt that there was a short time frame in which, if Donna Martz was still alive, that we would be able to apprehend them and save her.
Special Agent Welkin knows they must speed up the process of tracking the victim's credit card usage.
I contacted Ben Patty, a retired FBI special agent who was employed by a major credit card company issuing Donna Martz's card.
At Visa's San Francisco headquarters, International Fraud Control Director Ben Patty agrees to help.
Normally, when a cardholder uses their credit card, that bank that issued the card will not see that transaction information for 2 to 3 days. That's when it's posted, and the bank would then know where the transaction occurred. Craig Welkin was really wanting to find out when the card that belonged to Donna Martz was used in real time, which we could not do with the systems as they were at that time.
To locate the suspects the instant they use the card, Visa must create a complex reporting system for a single credit card. But Donna Martz's life is on the line.
We contacted the systems people in the computer center and explained to them what we wanted. They said, okay, we'll go into our systems, make the necessary changes in the mainframe computer so that this specific cardholder number could be captured as it came through our systems.
The programmers estimate it will take at least 24 hours to create and implement the new program. FBI agents hope that the computer program will finally put them closer to the murder suspects and to Donna Martz before she too is killed. The coroner for Lebanon County, Pennsylvania, determined that retired florist Guy Goodman was savagely beaten, and then slowly suffocated to death. His face was unrecognizable at the autopsy. The suspects, 21-year-old Bradley Martin and 27-year-old Carolyn King, have more than 20 felony convictions between them and are now fugitives on the run across the heartland of America. Authorities believe the couple is holding their latest victim, Donna Martz, captive and using her credit cards. The last charge was recorded in Montana. The FBI and police from across the country are in pursuit, tracking the suspects through the victim's credit card usage. Investigators remain one step behind. Led by Special Agent Craig Welkin.
That was due to the flow of the information from the merchants to the credit card company, and then when that information was actually available from the computer database.
In 1993, banking computers take days to post each transaction. Investigators await a new Visa program that will trap any activity on Martz's card. Pennsylvania detective Paul Zeckman chased the pair from the beginning of their flight.
It was very frustrating being days behind locating places that Martz's credit card had been used, because we knew that, number one, this couple had killed Guy Goodman. We knew that Donna Martz potentially was going to be the next victim. If she had not already been killed, there was nothing we could do more than what we were doing to try and locate them and stop this from happening.
Investigators try to estimate where the suspects will go next. They alert all law enforcement agencies on the suspects' possible routes. They post descriptions of the suspects in their vehicle in the National Crime Information Center's nationwide database.
We entered both Bradley Martin and Carolyn King in NCIC. They were also entered in as kidnapping suspects. In addition to that, regional messages had gone out to all the police departments to be on the lookout for Donna Martz, Carolyn King, or Bradley Martin.
If any police force in the country runs into the couple, the Bismarck Task Force will be notified. To further increase their chances, investigators fax descriptions of the suspects and the victim to police agencies along Martin and King's likely routes. But there are no incoming leads beyond the sporadic credit card purchases. Detectives Wayman and Zeckman returned to Pennsylvania to re-interview everyone who knows the fugitives. They hope Martin and King have made contact with someone back home.
We continually talked to individuals in the Palmieri area who were associates of Bradley Martin, trying to find out if there was recent contact with him or Carolyn King, and if there was, where were they at, where did they call from.
But no one offers new information. Despite every effort, investigators still have nothing. The FBI receives an update from the Visa Corporation in San Francisco.
This is Ben Patty, Visa International.
Visa fraud investigator and former special agent Ben Patty had asked the company's systems programmers for a way to trace Martz's credit card transactions as they are made.
And I told the FBI, and we set up a system of contact between our systems people in Virginia, myself, and then the FBI and their command post. After the system was in place, the first transaction that came through was a service station gas transaction in Southern California.
It was in Los Angeles several hours earlier. Investigators are closer, but still too far behind. While the task force notifies authorities in the LA area, Visa gets another hit on Donna Martz's card.
The transaction came through our systems in real time. As soon as it came through the systems, we notified the FBI's command post and it would have been within hour, 2-hour time that the transaction actually occurred.
Then a transaction is made at a hotel in National City outside San Diego. Agents at the command post contact the FBI's San Diego field office. And the lead goes to Supervisory Special Agent Sam Stanton.
We received information that the Donna Mart's credit card had been used at the hotel in National City. So immediately I dispatched agents over to the hotel off Interstate 5. Agents interviewed the manager and the security guard and employees at the hotel and was able to determine that a couple matching Martin and King had stayed at the hotel using Donna March's credit card.
But the couple checked out 2 hours earlier, paying for the room with the visa. Police officers and FBI agents swarmed the area, checking hotel parking lots, convenience stores, and gas stations for Donna Martz's Chrysler New Yorker or any sign of Martin and King. Special Agent Stanton knows finding the car is a long shot, especially when that car has a 2-hour lead on authorities.
Where San Diego's a very large city, and to try to find a vehicle in a city that size would be almost impossible. But we did put out an all-points bulletin and notified the state judicial police and the federal police in Mexico and the Border Patrol, thinking that maybe the individuals were headed toward Mexico.
The Tijuana border is the busiest in the world. In 1993, nearly 40,000 Americans cross into Mexico every day without having to show even an ID. If the fugitives make it past the border, it is unlikely they will ever be found.
All right. I know it's been a couple of days, but have you heard from Brad or Carolyn?
Wow.
Then, the Pennsylvania detectives finally catch a break that narrows the search.
What did he have to say?
According to Chief Michael Wayman.
We received information from an associate of Bradley Martin's, indicating that they had received a phone call from Bradley, and that Bradley was in San Diego, that he was with Carolyn King, and that they were headed back towards Pennsylvania. We took that information. We notified the San Diego office of the FBI, and they in turn notified the California Highway Patrol.
The fugitives made the call as they checked out of the hotel in San Diego. Martin and King still have a 2-hour lead, but authorities continue closing the gap. Soon a hunch and a bit of luck will bring the investigation to a violent and dangerous conclusion. Fall 1993. Authorities chase Bradley Martin and Carolyn King, suspected of murder in Pennsylvania and kidnapping in North Dakota. Investigators from both states are frustrated that for weeks they have been one step behind the suspects. They hope to find the pair before the abducted woman, Donna Martz, is killed. Then a new program created by the Visa Corporation at the FBI's request puts investigators only 2 hours behind the suspects. Investigators learn the two have just checked out of a San Diego area hotel. Based on their checkout time and the tip that the fugitives are heading east, FBI agents try to estimate their position. Special Agent Stanton has a hunch that the suspects will use Interstate 8, the southernmost highway going east. He determines that Martin and King will soon be approaching El Centro, California, near the Arizona border.
I called Agent Paul Vick in the El Centro office of the FBI and asked him to send out an all-points bulletin.
Stanton hopes he has picked the right route, as El Centro Special Agent Paul Vick takes it from there.
I called the California Highway Patrol dispatchers and asked them to broadcast the Martz's car description.
Wanted for murder that just left a hotel in San Diego, and we suspect they might be headed east on Interstate 8 and even stopped.
The All Points Bulletin about 187 suspects, police code for murder, is transmitted to every officer on Interstate 8, including California Highway Patrolman Richard Chambers.
CHP unit, South Central, continuing standby copy information on 187 suspects possibly en route to South Central.
I went and checked my section of the freeway like I normally would in the beginning of my shift, and I went west on Interstate 8.
As Chambers drives, he receives the suspect's descriptions.
First suspect is a Bradley Martin, white male, 6 foot 160. Second subject is a Carolyn King, black female, wanted by the FBI.
Within minutes, Chambers believes he has spotted the car.
I was driving west on the freeway through the desert, and there's not that much traffic. I saw the car go by eastbound, and I believed it matched the description.
But Chambers cannot see the car's license plate.
I wasn't sure, so I made a U-turn through the center divider and overtook the vehicle and verified the license plate. And it was, in fact, bearing the North Dakota license plate that we had received. Central 11684, I think I'm behind the 187 vehicle. Could you send me a backup car?
Suspect in the vehicle, looks like the black female driving. 21.
Dispatch advises Officer Chambers that there is no backup immediately available.
880, 10-8, Stevenson 880, 10-8 responding.
Only one unmarked unit races to catch up to the suspects.
That's Sergeant Riley responding to the pursuit, joining pursuit.
Police know the suspects are desperate and probably armed.
2 suspects, a black female driving. We'll attempt to contact DPS.
10-4, and they know I'm behind them at 60 miles an hour coming up on 186.
10-4 at 60 miles per hour coming up on 186.
But so far, the suspects appear calm as they approach State Route 186.
Report, they're going to head us south on 186 where it left. They're getting off 186.
10-4 southbound on 186.
Chambers' backup is still several miles behind, racing to catch up. On Route 186, the chase intensifies.
They're not stopping, they're trying to accelerate to
70. The suspects try to shake Officer Chambers, but he maintains pursuit, even as they escalate to 90 miles an hour.
South Central, notify YPD and DPS. Looks like we're going to be going Yuma and they go IA eastbound. Proceeding eastbound in Arizona.
The suspects cross into Arizona with Chambers on their heels. Although a California officer outside of his jurisdiction, Chambers continues his pursuit. He relays information to Arizona authorities. Then, the danger increases.
The male passenger did come out of the right front window with a handgun.
They're shooting. They are shooting. Sound like they're shooting.
Chambers stays on them, intent to capture the deadly suspects. As the cars speed toward the town of Yuma, Arizona, dozens of officers listening in race to cover Chambers. October 5th, 1993. California Highway Patrol Officer Richard Chambers engages in a high-speed chase with murder and kidnapping suspects Carolyn King and Bradley Martin. Near El Centro, California, the pursuit crosses into Arizona. Backup is responding. But as the suspects barrel toward the town of Yuma, Arizona, Officer Chambers is on his own and under fire. He knows he must capture the pair before they kill again. The suspects exit onto a smaller road, this one with intersections. Chambers radios their position.
They're going into Yuma now. Get my units out there, back them up.
They run through 2 stop signs without incident. Then, when they crash, the suspects flee on foot.
I got out of my car and drew my pistol and ordered them to stop, and I told them if they didn't stop, I'd shoot, and at that time the female did stop.
Then, Carolyn King orders Martin to stop.
Hey, get down! You, call right there!
And I was able to handcuff the female. I just had one pair of handcuffs with me at the time, and I held the male passenger at gunpoint until Yuma PD arrived. It was probably only a minute or 2, but it seemed longer than that.
When the backup officer arrives, he helps take the suspects into custody.
Put your hands behind your back.
After a 2-week cross-country flight, pursued by police and the FBI, Carolyn King and Bradley Martin have finally been stopped. But investigators' first concern is the safety of the kidnapped woman, Donna Martz. She is not inside the car. On the floorboards lies the handgun Martin fired at Chambers. They open the trunk. Inside, police find duct tape, a knife, and Donna Martz's glasses. But nothing indicating where she is. Martin and King are taken to the Yuma Police Department, but they refuse to tell officers what happened to the kidnapped woman.
You met Donna Martz.
FBI agents arrive and interrogate the suspects separately. Carolyn King is defiant from the start, refusing even to admit her real identity. She claims no knowledge of Donna Martz. Another agent is unsuccessful with Bradley Martin as well. When Special Agent Paul Vick reaches the station, he learns that Martin has refused to talk.
Bradley Martin was pacing back and forth with his hands handcuffed behind him. He appeared to be in some kind of discomfort.
Vick decides to try another approach.
Martin told me that his neck hurt and he had pain extending down into his right arm.
Hoping to win Martin over and get him to cooperate, Vick offers to recuff him in front so he will be more comfortable. His strategy works.
Martin told me that he would speak with me.
The agent reminds Martin he had earlier invoked his right to an attorney, but the suspect says he is now waiving that right. Vick drafts a statement to ensure Martin's waiver will hold up in court.
Once he agreed to that, he signed this piece of paper that I wrote out that he agreed to talk to me, even though he had invoked earlier. After he signed that document, I looked him straight in the eyes and I told him that I knew that he killed somebody in Pennsylvania, but that I wanted to know that Martz was okay. And then I told him, "Is she okay?" And Martin looked at me and he told me, "No, I killed her."
Martin says they kept Mrs. Martz for over a week. But after several close calls with police, he decided to get rid of her. They stopped in the Nevada desert. He got her out of the trunk and walked her to a ditch at gunpoint. He says she knew he was going to kill her. She said one thing before he fired, that she loved her children. The news devastates everyone who had hoped to save Donna.
At the conclusion of the interview with Martin, we obtained a map which showed approximately where Martz could be located in Nevada. And we then faxed the map to the Elko, Nevada FBI office, at which time, late at night, the search was initiated to look for Donna Martz's body.
But Martin was doing drugs during his fugitive trek. His memory is unclear and his map inaccurate. Several times during the night, search crews call in for more information. The desert area near Elko, Nevada is hundreds of square miles. The crews do their best searching through the night and into the morning. Then, on October 7th, investigators find the body of Donna Martz about 1.5 miles off Interstate 80.
In a case like the Guy Goodman, Donna Martz homicides, the drive is to keep anyone else from getting hurt. Secondly, it's solving the case, get them off the street and into jail, and then successfully prosecute them.
In Nevada, Martin and King plead guilty to the kidnapping and murder of Donna Martz and receive life sentences. In Pennsylvania, they are found guilty of the murder of Guy Goodman. Both Martin and King are sentenced to death.
This case is an excellent example which showed the interagency cooperation between the FBI and local county and state officials in California, Arizona, North Dakota, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and numerous other states. From working together, we were able to solve this case and apprehend King and Martin and get them convicted.
For Donna Martz's 11 grandchildren, 3 children, family, and friends, the convictions bring a sense of closure. Even today, they are comforted in knowing police and the FBI caught Martin and King before they could claim yet another victim.